Good evening. Welcome to the 7 p.m. Thursday, May 22nd, 2004 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of Indian River County. The first item this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. Maria, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of April 10th, 2014. Any comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Todd gave the first motion. And okay, you got it. Item number 3 is this evening is the public hearing. It's Family Dollar Gifford Mixed Use, and it's Hutton Growth 1 LLC's request to rezone approximately 3.32 acres from RM10 to PDMXD and to obtain a conceptual PD plan approval. And so the first thing I'll ask before I turn it over to staff, is there anyone, if anyone on the commission has had any ex parte communications regarding this that would make you unable to render a fair judgment on this, please speak now. No? Stan? Well, I was just going to swear in at the public hearing part, unless we need to do it now.
You can do it. You may as well do it now and get out of it.
Okay.
If you're going to be testifying tonight at any of the hearings, could you please rise? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Zimmerman. John McCoy with the planning staff with the presentation. And this is a request for a rezoning and conceptual plan that would allow a Family Dollar as a Gifford mixed-use project. And I want to talk a little bit first about the process. And this is a plan development rezoning, so it's a rezoning and a concurrent plan development. And the first, it goes through the public hearing process, the first public hearing of which is tonight. And the Planning and Zoning Commission is to consider the rezoning request and the plan development request and make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners is then to consider it and approve with conditions or deny it. If it's approved, that's where a normal rezoning would end, but with the PD, the concurrent PD, it then continues on into the process on the right side of the screen with the preliminary PD, which actually comes back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if the board approved this, you all would see it again. If approved at that level, it either gets a land development permit waiver, and then once constructed, it would get a final PD plat approval by the Board of County Commissioners. So it's similar to a rezoning in the first 2 steps, and then it goes on beyond that with the design and construction processes. Next item I'd like to discuss is the zoning map. And the subject site is in gray. If the rezoning is approved, it would actually be rezoned from RM10 excuse me, to PDMXD. You can see the surrounding property to the south, to the east, and to the north across 45th Street, zoned RM10. Sort of catty corner to the northwest, property zoned RS6, and then commercial industrial as you go further west on the north side of 45th Street, across 43rd Avenue to the west, property zoned commercial industrial. So this sort of sets the stage and is part of the analysis for the rezoning in that by and large it's residential around the property and to the east, by and large across 43rd Avenue to the west, by and large commercial industrial, and is adjacent to a commercial industrial node. For PDMXDs, there's a long list of criteria that they need to meet. Some of that is locational criteria, and we laid out all the criteria in the staff report and how it met those, so I don't want to go into great detail there, but I do want to point out locationally, this is adjacent to a commercial industrial node, and it is at the intersection of 2 thoroughfare plan roads as far as the locational criteria for meeting that MXD criteria. The land use, the underlying land use under the zoning is M2, which is also consistent with the PD rezoning. if approved, the rezoning ordinance, in addition to allowing the commercial component, will also require that some type of residential use, and it could be multifamily, most likely be multifamily, but that's the mixed use component. You need to do the residential, and it's tied to that commercial allowance. With that, I'd like to get to an aerial overlay, and the subject site is outlined in red. And you can see that this is an infill site. By and large, all the surrounding properties are developed. So you can see the proximity to residential. You can see the proximity to the commercial west across 43rd Avenue. And actually, immediately west, while the property is zoned commercial, it is a place of worship. It's a church across the street to the west. So as you go further west, you can see that the commercial industrial starts as far as the developed portion. With an infill development, a PD is a very good way to control, because the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of County Commissioners get to have some design control with an infill development like this. And the MXD is also a good mechanism to allow it, and one of the reasons the staff is recommending in favor of this. Just what the applicant's proposing, it is a 3.3 acre site, so it's a relatively small site, would allow up to 33 residential units by the zoning, and the zoning ordinance that is proposed would allow that, and also essentially an 8,300 square foot retail store. And I want to talk a little bit about the layout and design now. You can see the commercial buildings on the western portion, so it's essentially justified to the west, adjacent to the other commercial uses, and at the corner, which you'd expect the residential uses to the east, and that allows the transition or that interface between those two to occur internal to the planned development project. And that's part of the design, and again, part of why staff supports it, provides that compatibility internal to the overall project, and is again a good mechanism for allowing an infill development. As far as phasing, the red line is essentially the phase boundary, with the commercial component being the first phase, the residential component being the second phase, and it's justified slightly to the east of the retention area. Again, the retention area would be built in its entirety, and essentially the two driveways, most of the necessary infrastructure for the site to function will be developed with the first phase. As far as the dedications, there's a corner clip at a 40-foot corner clip at the intersection that would allow for signalization and a little intersection expansion. There's a sidewalk along 45th Street. There's a left turn lane proposed to serve the 45th Street driveway, and a transit stop just east of the driveway. Traffic circulation, there's two full movement driveways. There's a full movement driveway on 43rd Avenue and 45th Street. The one on 45th Street is served by the westbound left turn lane at the driveway. The other potential access point will be a driveway at the east end, and that's subject to approval or authorization by the property owner to the east. This is a private driveway. It's not a right-of-way, so there's not public control there. So it is subject to the property owner's agreement between the two property owners, but that would allow the residential or the residents of this development to access the commercial use without ever getting on a public street. And that's one of the benefits of actually getting that driveway connection. As far as dedications and improvements go, there's the 40-foot corner clip I mentioned. There is providing for a transit stop along the site's 45th Street frontage. There's a sidewalk that serves that transit and also connects internally to the site. There's the westbound left turn lane on 45th Street to serve the site's 45th Street driveway. The applicant on the conceptual plan is proposing to remove some specimen trees which will require mitigation. Right now they're looking at doing a fee in lieu of mitigation, and that would need to be collected prior to the issuance of a land clearing and tree removal permit. And again, you'll see this as it comes through the preliminary PD process. in a little more detail. One of the conditions will be that they have a common architectural theme, because right now the commercial buildings designed, the residential buildings are not designed. So that'll be a condition that the residential buildings have some common architectural themes with the commercial building. And the zoning ordinance will contain a zoning reverter, meaning if construction doesn't occur within the 7-year period, this site will revert to the RM10 zoning district, kind of a sunset provision within the zoning. As far as the landscape plan, it will have foundation plantings. Didn't label that, but it will have foundation plantings around it. There is a thoroughfare plan landscape on 45th Street and on 43rd Avenue, and a type B buffer where the commercial use is adjacent to the multifamily use to the south. And there's a masonry wall as part of that buffer, which will have landscaping on both sides of it. The wall projects about 50 feet past that dashed line, and that's illustrated by that brown line on the slide. And they've carried that over just to cut off the sort of the oblique view from the adjacent property. As far as public benefits, and all plan developments need to propose public benefits. Usually with a plan development, folks are looking for design waivers, they're looking for reduced setbacks, smaller lots, things like that. In this particular case, they're not seeking any design waivers. They're going through the PD process because it's required for the mixed-use zoning, and essentially there's an incentive for the commercial, and that's why they're going through and needing to demonstrate the public benefits. Public benefits are the corner clip, which is a donation, the 45th Street sidewalk, which is not required by the sidewalk and bikeway plan, the transit stop along 45th Street, and in this particular instance, the retail aspect has agreed to restrict the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages on site as part of their agreement with the community, and that'll be a part of the zoning ordinance. That becomes a restriction within the zoning ordinance itself and rolled into the zoning ordinance as far as that prohibition of sales. With that, I'll get to the elevation. It will have foundation plantings, but the architects like to show off their work, so this is without any foundation plantings. But it does have a sloped roof feature. It does have additional window treatment, some faux windows, shutters, and additional architectural embellishments. And again, there need to be a common architectural theme, and they can use elements from architectural elements from this to create the residential design. With that, I would like to get to the recommendation. Staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve or recommend approval of the PD rezoning and conceptual plan to the Board of County Commissioners with the conditions and staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I open it up to the public hearing, does anybody on the commission have any questions about this application? No. I just have a couple. Did they ever have to build the multifamily? I mean, I remember we went back and forth about this. We may have even changed it at one point. At one point, there was a high percentage of multifamily that needed to be built, and then we said, well, that's only for small ones. But tell me.
For a smaller site like this, they can, the retail component, the commercial component that they show is the most they can have on the site, and they can go ahead and build that without any of the residential being built. So the residential can come along later, but there's no time frame, and there's no holdup for this size commercial. Right. And on a site this size, that really kind of makes sense. You might remember one of the functions of the mixed use was to take the place of what we used to have, the neighborhood commercial, where you'd carve out an acre and a half or 2 acres right at a corner, and there wouldn't be any interconnections or planning for residential, and no plan development control. So in this size property, in this location, it really is functioning like neighborhood commercial, convenience and grocery goods, that size scale. But all of the commercial that's shown on this plan can go forward and get CO'd without the residential being started.
Is it the feeling of the staff and is it the feeling of the community, if you've heard from them, that the highest and best use for the multifamily portion is multifamily?
Well, there's a couple of options that have been discussed, and yes, community leaders have been involved in the TRC meetings. They've been really supportive, I think, of the project. It could either be multifamily. There's been talk of multifamily perhaps for the elderly, and certainly that would apply. Even some type of assisted living or some degree of assisted living would also qualify as residential. So either standard multifamily, elderly housing possibly, or some type of assisted living is a possibility. And I don't know, John, unless there's anything more specific that's been discussed than that.
Those are the specifics of what has been discussed. The way the zoning ordinance will be structured is it will be restricted to residential uses going forward, those residential uses that are allowed in the RM10 zoning district by the same process that the RM10 zoning district would allow those residential uses. So it can remain vacant, but at such time that development is proposed, it does need to be a form of residential development.
But is it the consensus, I mean, is it the consensus of the community, and is it the opinion of staff that multifamily, I mean, I understand the control of the,
Yes.
you know, that's great, and controlling what the architectural standards, and there's many, many good reasons to have it be the zoning that it is, rather than just rezoning the whole thing to commercial. I get that part of it, but is it the opinion of staff and the consensus of the community that it makes sense for the remaining portion to be multifamily, or is it never going to be developed multifamily? It really is something else.
Yeah, it's staff's opinion that multifamily is a good use on the eastern portion, and I don't believe we've had any objections or anything but support from the community leaders. I believe we have a couple here and they could speak to that during the public hearing portion.
That's all I have. Does anybody have any other questions before I open the public hearing?
Yeah, are the entrances and exits going to be regulated by stop signs or signals?
There'll be stop control, stop signs.
Stop
It'll be
signs?
signage and pavement markings that will, yes.
So even for the left-hand turn lane that gets added, that'll be a stop sign or?
With the left hand, with the left turn, it will be a yield condition such that they will need to stop and yield to oncoming traffic.
So by sign? By signage?
Correct, by
Yeah.
markings and signs, yes.
John, what type of signage will be permitted here? Will it be monument sign, or will it be pole mounted?
It is monument-style signs, and it is subject to the corridor criteria, which does require the monument signs, and some reduced facade signage has some criteria as far as colors and design of signs.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up the public meeting, so if anybody would like to speak on this, the public hearing section of this is open. So please just come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure will. Freddie Woodfork, 4590 57th Avenue, Vero Beach, Florida. I'm glad to be here tonight and on a very amicable atmosphere when there has been a lot of legwork, a lot of dialogue, a lot of planning, a lot of just good communication. I'm reminded about what my teacher once told me one time. He said, rules without a relationship brings about a rebellion. And here we had a relationship and the rules were discussed. So the rebellion is not here tonight. It's really acceptance of this plan, mixed use. And that goes right into my first point, which states that the earlier meetings that we had were really fruitful. Brought all the players to the table, met several times, came out to the Gifford area, met with the Family Dollar representatives, met with the church that had the land, met with community leaders and residents, and got their input. And then again, it goes back to one of those adages that he who speaks first loses. And so we kind of kept our mouth closed to hear exactly what was coming forth as far as the plans. And we were elated because it goes into a theme that came up about 3 or 4 years ago in the Gifford community, and that was the theme of Gifford Forever. Gifford Forever. And what that meant was that we don't want, as Gifford residents, to one day, not me, because I probably won't be here 20 or 30 years from now, but someone come back and say, where's Gifford? It's gone. All commercial, all heavy industry, no residential area. So this goes right in line with the spirit of Gifford Forever, making sure that individuals who return back to the Indian River County and return back to Gifford will have some chance to find a residential area there. It also goes back to about 10 years ago, serving with the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. I was on that Workforce Enhancement Task Force. And what was brought up in that report is that people wanted not only work, they also wanted amenities that other communities have, like stores and walking distant products. But here, and here is exactly what we have now. We have a Family Dollar coming to Gifford with the elderly citizen complex on the north side, a church on the west side, another senior citizen / residential complex on the south side. So it sets right in the middle. And to go further with that, with the mixed use, is really going to give us that, what we talked about, walking distance accessibility. Very, very important. I do want to make sure that we go on record. I heard it talked about the reverter clause of the residential area if nothing happens within 7 years. I really want something to happen. That's one little clause. I want to make sure we highlight that that is carried out. Don't come in with the bells and whistles and all of a sudden, oh, we forgot about the residential. It's married with no divorces, no walking away. They must stay married all the way through. The other point we talked about is I love to hear about the access. That's beautiful. Not only access from 45th Street, but also access from 43rd Avenue, and having the theme not only there with the Family Dollar store, but also filter over into the residential area. That's going to be a beautiful site. Again, helping Gifford forever. The no alcohol, well, that's been discussed and agreed upon. I feel very comfortable that that will be adhered to, and I'm sure Stan and staff will make sure that happens because, again, you have a church across the street, elderly citizens in the front, a residential is there, school about a block away. So all those things to me are very precious, and we're going to make sure that we protect that particular area. Again, I want to appreciate the dialogue, the open dialogue that we had with the county, with the Family Dollar representative, with the church, with the residents, so that we all came to agreement that this is a great amenity for the Gifford area, and it goes in line with what we've been planning on. And it also sends a loud message. Gifford residents are not against growth. We're not against improvements. We're not against businesses improving themselves. No, we're not. No. But we are against those things that bring detrimental impacts against our way of life. And this does not do that. So we're happy to see that. And the last point is the sidewalk. We're glad to see that the sidewalk is going to be put on that forefront of 45th Street. Hopefully that's the beginning of the connectivity we talked about sidewalks. People do walk in Gifford. A lot of people don't have cars. So the more we can include these sidewalk phases in, the quicker we can get a complete sidewalk that connects with the other main body of the sidewalk project. So I just want to stand here on behalf of me as a resident of Gifford and a very active person in the Gifford, Indian River County area. I really appreciate and agree with this concept and hope that you will do so also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your thoughts very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearing's still open. Anyone else that would like to speak? Please come on up. Your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Adelet, 4570 57th Avenue. I just wanted to say that this is a good project that we look forward to it coming to our community, and we hope that you support it.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Matthew Campo with Campo Engineering. I'm the applicant's representative. Basically here to address any questions. Mr. McCoy did a great job as far as just presenting what we're doing. I think one of the key things that about Family Dollar, it's changed in the recent years, is they do have cold goods and food products. So they do become more of like a convenience store, not just a store where you go in and get, inexpensive detergent. So that has made a difference in their type of marketing and the areas they target, which are areas where they can be part of the community. A lot of foot traffic. We see a lot of bikers coming, bicycles as far as coming into the store. That's how a lot of their patrons come now, because they're local folks from the surrounding area. But again, I'm here for any questions. I think the project as we presented it pretty much speaks for itself. About 6 months of work has gone into working with staff to get to where we are. So hopefully the result speaks for itself.
I'm not sure if you're the right person, but who maintains the transit stop?
The transit stop will become part of what the MPO, if I'm not mistaken, will become responsible for that.
Any other questions of the applicant's representative? Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Well, guys, you gotta remember, you guys are really making our job easy. I don't know, you guys are working too hard. Everybody comes up in here and it's a love fest these days, but congratulations. Sounds like a lot of hard work went into it. Sounds like the community is pleased, and The applicant obviously has a good use, or it appears, it's my opinion, has a good use for this site, so well done. That's my commentary. If anybody else has any other questions or anything they want to say, otherwise I think we're ready for a motion.
Going to close the public hearing then?
I'm sorry, yep, that's right. Public hearing is closed.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. You didn't get that? I know that Todd had the first motion. I'm not sure who seconded.
Dr. Day.
Dr. Day Okay, all right, very good. Thank you. Okay, item number 4 on our agenda is consideration of an amendment to the LDR's Section 901.03 definitions to establish the definition of a commercial service street and to modify the definition of a yard, front to specify the appropriate yard designations for properties that abut a commercial service street. And at that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Stan Bowling, County Community Development Director. This is a land development regulation amendment, and it is really focused on one particular street segment, and so it is designed to recognize the unique characteristics of 50th Avenue, which I'll go into in just a moment. If adopted, this ordinance could also apply to any other similarly situated street if the criteria are met and if it's so designated by the Board of County Commissioners. Just to orient you on the history of what led to this proposed amendment, I'm pointing out a site that's located on the west side of US 1 in Wabasso, on the north side of 87th Street, and to the east of 50th Avenue. And in this particular location, 50th Avenue runs from 87th Street up past just a few properties and then curves and goes back in to US 1. And at the corner of 87th Street and US 1, there's been a retail store. It was a convenience store, Cumberland Farms, with gas pumps at one time. And then a few years ago, it was converted to a few other retail uses. And then the current property owner came in and did quite a good job in basically renovating the building, kept the existing building did not change, the footprint did not change, I should say, but architecturally, the facade, the roof line all changed. There were a lot of nonconformities on this site that were brought up to, closer to meeting current codes, so they reduced nonconformities, put in some landscaping along US 1 and 87th Street, and really did some architectural treatments that compatible with corridor requirements. Actually went a little above and beyond what our requirements were for this type of renovation project. They also removed a pole sign that was non-conforming, and they have a conforming monument style sign. Once that project got underway, and it's a wellness center now, the owner obtained the property to the north and came in several weeks ago with a pre-application conference, a preliminary plan to expand the business and essentially take the existing building line and just extend the footprint north like I'm showing here, put in the parking area and have other green spaces and so forth. In this particular location and under our existing code, 50th Avenue, the only real classification that we can give it is a local street. We have a couple of choices in our code now. Is it a street, for instance, that gives the primary access for some of the properties, or is it an alley? And what we actually found in this case is that for a lot of the properties that front on US 1, it does function like an alley. In fact, for this property here, there is a driveway connection here and along 87th Street, but there's also a kind of a dumpster location for pickup and really just secondary access. It's an unusual function, and part of the history of this segment of 50th Avenue is certainly unique. In this particular case, part of the street was established in the 1920s with an initial plat and some of the lots being established here to the west and eventually lots to the east. And but it's a narrow road. It has a limited amount of right-of-way. It's constrained. It only serves a few properties that you can see here on the aerial. All of these properties are zoned commercial, and every property that it serves is zoned commercial. There are commercial businesses as well as some residences and church. And in this particular area, after the initial lots were platted in the 1920s, US 1 came through later. And in this particular case, you can see US 1 actually kind of ate away some of the eastern portion of the original blocks, and then as it goes to the north, you can see that this entire remainder half-block area tapers, and you really start to see some depth constraints as you get really actually into this expansion property here, and certainly to the properties to the north. When staff took a look at this situation, we felt that given the unique function of 50th Avenue and the fact that all these properties probably need some kind of special treatment in terms of this whole half block here, that we needed to take a look at the function of 50th Avenue. And so staff was supportive of a land development regulation that would classify this type of street, and that's essentially what this amendment does. This item was discussed before the Board of County Commissioners last month, and the board was in agreement that an LDR amendment was warranted, and asked staff to initiate the amendment process. So this is essentially a county-initiated process. And I'll come back to this type of slide toward the end to show you some of how this would work in practice. Staff's conclusion is that 50th Avenue has a unique history and function, that the existing LDR street types that are in our code do not reflect the 50th Avenue situation, that an LDR change addresses and should address the entire segment rather than trying to set up a property-by-property variance approach. Kind of the whole block or whole half block should be looked at. And again, the Board of County Commissioners did authorize us to move forward with this. The existing LDRs define 6 road types, and you can see this in the proposed ordinance that's in your backup. From the highest classification going down to the lowest classification, we start off with the highest classification. That's a principal arterial road, and US 1 is a good example of that. A minor arterial road is the next highest classification, and Indian River Boulevard is an example of that. And the difference here is a principal arterial road is really a regional road. It goes for long distances. And it's a major road. Now, Indian River Boulevard is also a major road, of course, but it is really just contained within the county. It's not a regional roadway per se. Collector Road is the next lowest classification in this particular area. Wabasso, for instance, or down into Winter Beach. Old Dixie and 69th Street are examples of a collector road. Going down further in the classification system, subdivision collector roads, the next classification. In the South County, 2nd Street in Indian River Heights is a good example of a subdivision collector road. In that case, it's a major east-west road for the subdivision. It has a number of local streets that hook into it, and then it feeds out on a collector road. Same with 87th Street in Vero Lake Estates, many miles to the west of this particular location. Again, many local streets within Vero Lake Estates feed into 87th Street, and that goes out onto County Road 510. So that's a subdivision collector road. Many roads in our counties that people live off of, for instance, or small businesses might be off of, are minor or local streets. And in our particular example that I just showed you, 87th Street there on the west and east side of US 1 is a local street. And we also have marginal access streets, really very few of those in the county. The typical example really is shared commercial driveways that are parallel to US 1 or State Road 60 in shopping centers. They're really kind of, in the old days, you would probably just call this a frontage road that serves commercial properties. That's essentially what a marginal access street is. The proposed amendment would add a 7th type of street, and that would be done by adding a definition of commercial service street, and the characteristics are outlined in the definition itself. A street with limited right-of-way that serves commercially zoned parcels only. It functions as an alley or secondary access for parcels that front an arterial, and is designated as a commercial service street by resolution of the Board of County Commissioners. That way the board can take a look at the characteristics of a street and determine if it meets these criteria. Also, the proposed amendment looks at setbacks. What are appropriate setbacks for such a street? For double frontage properties that front an arterial and also a commercial service street sort of on the rear side, a front yard setback would apply adjacent to the arterial, and a 10-foot setback for the rear yard along the commercial service street. And for other properties that are served by the commercial service street, a front yard or 25-foot setback would apply, and that's no change to the current situation. Let me just show you what that means, for instance, using the example of 50th Avenue. properties between US 1 and 50th Avenue are double frontage lots. The front streets on opposite sides. And in this case, the front yard setback to a commercial building would apply 25 feet, 10 feet along 50th Avenue. Now, I'll hasten to add that along 50th Avenue, that would still be a street type and require, even if a building backed up to 50th Avenue, that there would be a required landscape strip of 15 feet that's actually allowed to be decreased down to 10 feet once you get to a very narrow depth lot. So there would be a street buffer along this 50th Avenue on the east side, but you basically have the back of buildings essentially. Also, I want to point out that what's different about commercial zoning districts, and again, all these properties that front on 50th Avenue are commercial. The setbacks are a little different than you find in residential areas. Front yard setbacks are pretty substantial, in this case 25 feet, and the rear yard setbacks are reduced. And so that would allow a little more building envelope flexibility for these properties that have these depth constraints, as we've discussed a little bit earlier. So in practical terms, that's what would happen on this street, is you would have a reduced or rear yard setback, but still a buffer requirement along the east side of 50th Avenue. On the west side, it would remain a front yard setback because it's accessing these other parcels as like a local street. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance. Be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Stan, why isn't this being done by variance? This is as close to spot zoning as anything I've ever seen.
Yeah,
It applies to one property. We're changing an LDR. I mean, why don't we just do this by variance?
Well, I think that actually this type of situation applies to properties more than just the property that's being proposed for expansion. The property to the north of it is in a similar situation and could easily be, renovated and redeveloped. So we think that it makes sense to have that whole, the characteristic of that whole street looked at. It is an LDR amendment that right now applies to a very unique area. Well, no, it applies to all the properties along 50th Avenue. And so it's treating all the properties on the east side of 50th Avenue the same. And you don't necessarily get that with a parcel by parcel variance approach. And it's treating all the parcels that are on the west side the same in terms of setbacks. And staff thought that was a good approach to use in this case. But you're right. I mean, a variance procedure could be, there are grounds for variance, a typical type of variance. But again, we thought that having equal setbacks and equal treatment is important.
The peculiar thing about it to me is you're talking about one street in the county.
Yes.
One street in the county. I mean, that's at least as peculiar to have an LDR change for one street in the county, and then any more that are going to be added to it have to be done by BCC approval. I mean, to me, that's a stranger course to take than to acknowledge we're going to have to grant a variance for this property and probably for any other ones that, are on this street. I'm not sure I understand. I mean,
well, again, I'll just repeat myself. I think it will be a better result to have equal treatment on each side of the street. And I think you would get that with this LDR amendment. I agree it's unusual in that, we have a particular case here of a short segment that has these characteristics, and we're recognizing
what about the property that is, so that I understand the rules that would apply to any, under this new proposed LDR. I can think of a similar land configuration because it's a piece of property I go by every day when I'm traveling north on US 1. And it's the 510 US 1 Old Dixie Highway, that little sliver where Old Dixie Highway goes off as you're traveling south on US 1, and and here's 510, and there's that stranded commercial parcel right there. Would that qualify under these same rules, or is there something unique about that? I mean,
yeah, there's something different about that.
What's different about that?
Yeah, that particular segment, it's actually designated as a collector street. It has a normal amount of right-of-way in it and kind of normal pavement and configuration where it can be improved to a higher standard street than a local street because of the right-of-way that's there.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, the county owns that building there, that's the Fender property on that triangle of property there on
Yeah.
US 1 that you're referring to.
Yeah.
And when the US 1 510 intersection improvements come through,
Right.
you'll see that go away.
Okay. But it looks the same on a map from above.
It does. Sure.
But
It does.
I'm
No,
not
you
familiar
made
with
a
all the
good point.
details of that.
Right.
I mean,
And just to follow up on the LDR, and one of the reasons from a staff perspective to pursue an LDR amendment.
Yeah, help me
is-
with that.
Is there becomes more predictability in that when the parcels to the north come in, somebody comes in to see staff, you can say, these are the criteria that apply. It's a 10-foot building setback on the rear for the parcels to the north, and there's not the uncertainty of saying, you've got to seek a variance, got to go in front of the Board of Adjustment. The one to the south was granted, but there's no necessary predictability for the parcels going north.
Well, it's neither here nor there. I mean, I think I disagree with you, but it's obviously a problem that needs to be fixed. And so if this is the way that everybody wants to do it, I mean, I'm okay with it. I think a variance is the way to go. I think monkeying with the LDRs for one 150-foot road in the county is nuts, but I'm not going to, let's fix the problem. So, whatever. It's a crazy way to do it, but.
Is this truly the only section of the road in the county that's going to be impacted by that, or there are others that we don't know about at this point?
Well, yeah, it is, I guess I've said this before, it's kind of hard to know what you don't know, but we think that this is unique. And we're using the word, I think, correctly there. But we also have that resolution, that designation by the Board of County Commissioners for them to evaluate the criteria as well. But we do think this is a unique situation here. And it has a unique history. There's a reason why it functions and it has constraints the way it is, because the way it was originally platted, and then it was, all the other options for expanding it were really taken away the way that US 1 came through in that particular location.
We could do a corridor plan for this street.
Well, we do have a corridor plan that we can apply there.
Okay. All right. This is the way you want to do it. Any further discussion? Are we supposed to make a motion to recommend, to
Yeah.
approve your recommendation to the BCC?
This is a public hearing,
Public hearing.
and see if anybody wants to speak, and then yes, this is a
This
recommendation
is a public
to the board.
hearing?
Yes, sir.
This is a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? No, not this evening. Okay, the public hearing is closed. Any further discussion? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
I'm going to give that one to Jordan. Jordan slipped in just under the wire. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Who seconded the motion?
Excuse me?
Who seconded the motion?
Jordan?
Jordan did.
Thank you. And who made the motion?
Todd?
Todd,
did.
thank you.
Item number 4 is Commissioners' Matters. And the only thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was the railroad, but if it's all right with you, if we could slide that in under, after you have what you have to say on item number 6.
Or take it now, it doesn't make any difference.
Take it now? Okay, well, then I'll go ahead and do that. I know we all read carefully that we have absolutely no jurisdiction. I'm sure we're probably well aware of that in advance of this meeting. But what I'm hoping to hear, can you give us a brief overview of what, if anything, the county commission has asked staff to do in terms of beginning to compile information to perhaps respond to the environmental report that is tied to the FRA thing, in terms of what impacts it may have in the county? It just seems to me, we deal with all the time, and you deal with all the time, you say, hey, something's happening in the county of consequence, it's a new development or something else. We have no jurisdiction in this case, absolutely understand that. But you all the time are evaluating and helping us evaluate what kinds of impacts. Have you been tasked with that by the county commission of taking maybe an inventory of the land that runs a certain distance from each side and what the uses are and the compatibilities and how they may be affected?
Let me tell you how we're gearing up. This particular process, because All Aboard Florida project is seeking a loan, a government loan, an environmental impact statement is required from the segment that runs from West Palm Beach all the way up to Orlando. South of West Palm Beach, it was a less involved environmental assessment report, but the environmental impact statement, a full impact statement, is required for what comes through the Treasure Coast and through our county. So that's our entry point into the process, is to comment on the environmental impact statement. And every local government staff is getting up to speed and learning about this process. It's nothing that anyone has, that I know of, local government staff is an expert in yet, but we're getting information on it. But more than just staff being geared up for looking at the environmental impact statement, I'll get into the process in just a moment, the Board of County Commissioners has approved and spent money and hired outside expertise on the behalf of the county, as well as the cities in terms of all the crossings in the county, to work together with the city staffs and outside experts, engineering, those who look at environmental impact statements. We have the CDM Smith on board as a consultant to help us through the EIS process. The Board of County Commissioners has also approved seeking outside counsel, which we are in the process of doing. The Attorney's Office is looking into that to bring in an attorney who has expertise in railroad law and EIS process, so that we've got legal expertise, we have engineering and environmental expertise, as well as what the expertise that staff can bring, the different disciplines, whether it's archaeological and historical, land use impacts, fiscal impacts that occur, as well as engineering. So, and again, we're working together with the staff as well as the other local governments in the county and in the region to kind of pool resources and do that. So that's essentially how things are getting staffed up with staff's expectations and what we're prepared to do, as well as outside expertise, because we desperately need outside expertise, and that's why the board has authorized it. Now, the environmental impact statement process, as we understand it, is normally a 45-day comment period. We've actually asked for 180 days, and if they couldn't do 180 days comment period, to give us 90 days. And a lot of other local governments and the Regional Planning Council has asked for 90 days. And so far, the response has been, we'll give you 75 days. So we'll see. We figure the more time that we have, the more thorough that we can be. Although I know there will be a lot of fevered attention to this once the environmental impact statement is actually issued. And we don't know when that's going to be. It has been imminent for a number of months and hasn't happened yet. Our understanding is that before the environmental impact statement can be finished, there actually has to be a physical walkthrough or survey of every crossing in every county. And so far, there's not been that field survey with All Aboard Florida's people and FDOT and county and city people through Indian River County yet. Our understanding is that has to happen before the environmental impact statement can be issued, and that walkthrough has not happened yet. So we still think realistically, it could still be months off from getting the environmental impact statement. It gives us more time to kind of gear up. We're also hearing, and there's a lot of expertise, I think, from Dr. Kim Delaney, who spoke before the Board of County Commissioners and the MPO, about the process itself. And this typically is a long process, multiple year process to go through. So, the environmental impact statement, whenever it is issued, it could be 700 pages long, it could be 1,200 pages long, and a lot of people will be looking at a lot of different parts of it, making comment. We're still seeking confirmation of the process. How can a citizen make comments? And there are public hearings. There's now supposed to be a public hearing in this county, and the question is, well, how do citizens get into that process? Is it a public hearing like we have here where people get to speak? Do they have to write down their comments? There's a lot of things that we're learning about the process. And as we learn, we're posting information on the county website. Right on the front homepage, there's a link there to a lot of information. I cautioned people up in Roseland at a meeting the other night I was at. I said, be careful when you hit download when you get to that link, because there are some documents that are very lengthy, but it's a good resource that we've got right on the homepage of the county. But the cities are geared up here too. City of Vero Beach has an ongoing commission. Every MPO meeting, which is almost once a month, there's an update there. So people are really gearing up, and the board is gearing up with outside expertise as well.
So you're going to be, is outside of what has ostensibly been promised during the 75-day or whatever the period's going to be, they say they're going to have a public hearing here. Is there any other public forum that has been proposed by a county or city, like where people could come in here, for instance, and, I mean, outside of the purview, perhaps, of, but, a public forum for people, experts, and then just citizens as well to voice their opinion about it?
Right. Well, people are, talking to their local government representatives without, All Aboard being there. All Aboard Florida's has a spokesperson that has come and given what I would call, limited information and kind of canned information in a way. We're looking to the EIS to give us a lot of details, and, it's taking a while for that to kind of roll out. Again, there are supposed to be public meetings in each county along the whole route, and we're asking now what kind of input, how's that going to be conducted, what's the format going to be, and we don't know the answer to that yet. In fact, we've got email communications out to the Federal Railroad Administration, who will be involved in conducting that.
The environmental statement that you were talking about, and you said that they hadn't done that here yet. Have they done that anyplace else? And is the statement the entire rail system, or is it county by county?
Right. There's an environmental assessment report, which is a lesser process, but still hundreds and hundreds of pages, that's been done from West Palm Beach south. We're on the segment to the north, and everything along that segment has to be included in the environmental impact statement. So, Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, Brevard, all the way up to Orlando. That whole segment has to be studied and included in the environmental impact statement. So we're not going to get the environmental impact statement in segments. It's going to be, this last segment. And again, the crossing work has happened in St. Lucie.
That's what I was going to
That's our understanding. It's happened in St. Lucie, but not in Indian River and not north of us. They seem to be going from south to north.
And are these the tracks and crossings that are used by Florida East Coast now, or are there others?
Well, I think what they'll be looking at are the existing crossings that are there now. And of course, for the entire segment, there are hundreds, as you might imagine, between Miami and Orlando.
Am I to understand correctly? I thought I might have read somewhere, maybe if this is so, it could be explained to me what it means, that Indian River County has officially requested that they could be a cooperating agency in terms of helping to draft and evaluate this report that's coming forward. Has that happened?
Yes.
Okay. But do we know anything about the process, about whether that's likely to be, what does that mean?
Again, it's a learning process for us, because this is something that, we have not come across before. We've been reaching out to other counties to see how we might be able to pool resources, especially if they're similarly situated. We have no stops scheduled here in Indian River County, much like Martin, much like St. Lucie County. Martin County is a little bit different, where they have bridges and trestles that the train has to go over that will involve the Coast Guard. And the environmental impact statement will also have to assess the different conditions of those structures, whether or not they can be expanded on, et cetera, et cetera. So like Stan said, it's going to be a very long process and a very detailed process as well.
And so we don't know what's typical. We don't know how the request that we have put in is going to be handled. We don't know if they consider Indian River County qualified or not to become a cooperating agency. We believe that if we are designated as one, that we'll actually get a longer time period in the commenting period. We'll actually get a look at the EIS a little earlier than when it's disseminated to the entire public. But again, like Bill said, we're learning. We're asking for everything we know how to ask for, and we're learning from the other counties and the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council as well.
And I think once we get to experience council on board in our preliminary discussions with some of them, they've advised us that we are going to have to gather experts together. You'll need a noise expert, you'll need a traffic expert, you'll need all kinds of different experts that would be able to take a look at the individual segments of the environmental impact statement and make comments on it. Engineers are just, I think, the beginning of it. You're going to see a whole lot of other folks involved in it over the course of
How does it
time.
get decided?
Pardon me?
How does it ultimately get decided?
And
You're just going to tell us it's going to be that way, and you just...
that's the other thing. You know, the whole environmental impact statement is brought about because of the request for the loan from the federal government. If that request is withdrawn, the need for the environmental impact statement also goes away. So we're not sure where it's
You don't
going
have to
yet.
spend all that money if it isn't going to help.
And in the EIS process, there's typically a finding of no significant impact or a finding of significant impact, and then if there is a finding of significant impact, how is it mitigated? So there's a lot to go through yet, and we think it's going to be a long process.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Commissioners' matters? Anybody have anything else? No? Planning matters?
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chairman. The West Gifford Initiative overlay regulations, the Board of County Committee, you all recommended approval with some incentive recommendations as well. The Board of County Commissioners had their first hearing on May 13th, and they had just one minor change to the ordinance itself. They were supportive of your recommended incentive changes. Two of them, paying the fees for building permits and site plan applications, and expediting review, that can be done, pretty quickly. And in fact, the board also directed us to, if we're going to pay for, building permits and so forth for somebody who's putting up the wall now, we really have two other owners, one who's already put up a wall and one who's applying. He said, make sure you refund those guys too, and make them, give the incentive to the folks that stepped up. So that is the direction that we're going in. We're still working out with the budget office and also one applicant who may be interested in doing the aesthetic wall, a type of incentive that might help. So we have to do some more work on that, and we'll be presenting that to the Board of County Commissioners at a later date, but not in the not too distant future. So right now, the second hearing that the board has to conduct is an after 5 o'clock hearing, 5:01 p.m. on June 3rd. But every indication they've given is that they're looking to approve the ordinance and approve the two easy incentives right away, and then work on the financial incentive. So they're following your recommendation. The other things that I wanted to mention, it looks like we will probably not have a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on June 12th, but it looks likely that we will have one on June 26th. And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Stan. I think you already covered your attorney's matters. Is there anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.